both mistakes.
Okay.
Tom, you're back.
Yes.
It's a miracle.
Are we ready?
You're live. You should be live now.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome to the latest and greatest soul session here at Creative Life Spiritual Center via Zoom technology, streaming to Facebook Live. Soul sessions, we've been doing these since 2017, and in the last year and a half, they've become a function of an initiative at the center called Be the Change, which is about social justice and social progress. And we have interviewed and had conversations with a number of interesting people from various walks of life. And tonight we present 4 members of Creative Life, 2 of them licensed religious science practitioners who have been members of the military. And you represent a larger group of people at Creative Life who've been members of the military. We couldn't have them all on here tonight. So we've got kind of the A team here. I think the 4 of you, I know all of you, the 2 of you who are practitioners, of course, we work together in that respect. And then Sean here is our, let me introduce everybody, and I don't know what order they're in on your screen, but you see their names. There's Tom Ryan, practitioner, Jim Cantor, practitioner, Dr. Dennis Slate, and Sean Kenneth Connelly. Sean is our maintenance chief at Creative Life. You see him coming to you from Creative Life tonight, sitting there at the edge of the stage. Dr. Dennis is a psychologist now with the Veterans Administration, and he works at our food drives. And anyway, you guys are just, you're 4 of the kindest, nicest people I know, and you're warriors. And now you're peaceful warriors. And so what I thought we'd talk about tonight, and this came up because of the 4th of July and patriotism and so on, is what kind of drove the calendar for this conversation. Thought we'd talk about freedom, what freedom means, spiritual freedom, political freedom, social freedom. And the first question I have for you, and as I said this to you in the run-up before we went live, I have some questions and you guys discuss, and I'll throw in some thoughts. I've not been in the military. My dad was, but I wasn't. And then it'll probably just turn into a wide-ranging conversation between the 4 of you, and I'll just sit here in awe. How does that sound? Does that sound good? Okay.
Yep.
So the first question I want to pose to you is this. None of you were drafted.
Nope.
You all enlisted. Jim, you had a congressional appointment, congressional recommendation to the Service Academy. Why in your 20s or before, when you could have been doing anything at all, did you select the military?
I'll shoot real quick off the hip. My dad served Army. I'm sorry, Jim, you're up.
No, go ahead.
It didn't default to me. It's staying on your screen. Go ahead. I'm next.
Okay, well, my dad was in the Marine Corps, and he'd just gotten back from Vietnam in '68 and was stationed at El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, and brought me down as a 17-year-old, and his commanding officer sat me in a Phantom and went over everything and handed me a Naval Academy catalog. And I had always, I always envisioned myself either going into the Navy or the Marine Corps. And so I said, what the heck, I'll apply. Because Dad was career Marine Corps, I got to apply under the presidential category, and so received a presidential appointment to the Academy. And I couldn't, at that time, it was the height of Vietnam, it was 1969. I could not imagine doing anything else, to be honest. There's nothing else I wanted to do. And as it turned out, 2 years in my sophomore year, when my draft number came up, it was 327. So likely I would not have been drafted anyway, but I was already in. I had wanted to do this my whole life, and I got there. It scared the living daylights out of me, but I got acclimated to it, and it was absolutely the best thing I've ever done.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Sean?
Real quick, yeah, my dad served, was a pilot, a Mohawk pilot in Vietnam. One brother was Air Force, the other brother was Army Rangers. And it just seemed like the right thing to do. For me, I came to the realization of, and it sounds kind of corny, but it was really defending the Constitution, realizing that what we have and how long we have survived into this agreement. And for me, it was just to defend that document. And I got sent to West Germany and I absolutely loved it. Did a lot of travel out of Europe, went to Israel, went to the former Soviet Union when Gorbachev was still in charge. We had a perestroika and glasnost. Was in Germany when the wall fell, actually visited West Berlin before and after the wall fell. So just the politics, the geopolitics. I worked as a colonel's in the S shop, staff battalion level with a colonel. And we did a lot of high-speed missions on the East German border. We'd actually have to take off all of our insignia and paint our Humvee insignia to ride on the East German border to do war planning. If the balloon ever went up, what would we do as a reaction, counter reaction? And so, yeah, it was a lot of high-speed missions, a lot of fun. Luckily, not in a combat condition. I did get hurt. We were ramping up for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and that's when I hurt my spine. But I'm still very blessed, very, very happy to have served and got out one piece at least. So.
Thank you, Sean. Let's
Yeah,
go to
that's it,
Tom
real quick.
because you mentioned Desert Storm, Desert
Yeah,
Shield, and Tom, you were there.
Yeah, I was actually a naval legacy. My grandfather was a naval commander under Halsey, Admiral Halsey in World War II. And my uncle was a full journalist in the military, Navy. I'm not sure exactly what time frame, sometime I believe during Vietnam. And he was stationed in Korea. To be honest, I entered the Navy because I wasn't ready for college. I knew my family had served in the military for a number of years. And it was, to me at the time, it felt like the best option, knowing going in there rather than attempting to go to college when I just wasn't ready for it. So, and then I actually served on a helicopter carrier in LPH, and we were actually on a Western Pacific cruise when Iraq invaded Kuwait. So we were already overseas. We were in the Philippines when it happened. So we then got ready to go over there and spent the next 3 months tooling around the Persian Gulf, waiting for Desert Shield, Desert Storm to actually kick off. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Dennis.
Yes. Similar story with the other panelists, only there was a long military tradition. I remember my grandmother talking to me about her great-grandfather, and then I had a great uncle that knew my great-great-grandfather on the paternal side, who had served in the Confederate cavalry or infantry. He'd come out of Tennessee, and the stories, I heard that. So I began to hear it. So there's a long line. There's a picture at home of my grandfather who fought World War I. And then there's a picture of my dad. One of my uncles, on the maternal side, one of my uncles was shot down on May 22nd, 1944. He was a fighter pilot and survived, POW. I could go on, but many, almost every male, like here in these, every male, cousin, uncles, it was part of the values we were passed down. Everyone serves. And so I served, I went in, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I'd always wanted to serve similar to Jim. So I went to OCS, was commissioned in 1986, was on a destroyers and a carrier. At one point at that time, the largest battle group assembled, and Iraq was our ally at the time. So I served 4 years, got out in January 90, said I'll never do that again, and came back, went back to grad school, and came back on active duty on September the 10th, 2001, and got to move between agencies and spend time with all branches, the Army, especially at Fort Sam Houston as a psychologist. Then I got an operational billet with 5th Group up at Fort Campbell. So got to see, and there was, I will say this, there are people I knew have been killed. You know, I said there was something I learned from Special Forces medic, 18 Delta. They said air goes in and out, blood goes round and round, can't live without a liver, kidneys smarter you, doc, good people die. So it's a reality that this is the military, it's what we do. But I had a great career and retired last year, and now I'm over to VA dealing with veterans. So.
Yes. We want to come back to that and talk about your work with veterans and the situations that you face post-combat, post-engagement with these men and women. When I see the military advertising itself on TV and at football games and baseball games and stuff, because it's kind of a target audience that they're recruiting from, young athletes. What's often emphasized is learn a skill, learn a trade. I know that you must have learned all sorts of mechanical and practical skills doing the work that you did. But I wonder about life skills. It seems to me, as a civilian, it seems to me that you would have a stronger sense of self-discipline, motivation, punctuality, that kind of thing as a result of your military background. Is that true?
Yes and no. Jesse, just a quick side note. The tankers would call us infantry guys crunchies because that's what we sound like when they run us over. So yeah, you learn a survival skill of staying the hell out of the way of anything that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rule 1, stay alive. Yeah.
Just stay alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say, my time as a midshipman was pivotal, and I learned a lot about how to be in a hierarchical group. Of course, my dad was something of a character. He was the antithesis of Marine, and yet he was fully Marine. And he was, I don't know, how do you say it? He was just an extraordinary person that kind of stood out in terms of being himself and always asserted himself. No one, from his perspective, no one outranked him. And he got away with it. I think that rubbed off on me just from observation. I think the biggest thing that I learned, one of the first things I learned, I went into the Naval Academy and I was pretty meek. I didn't know my way around. I was afraid of my shadow. I tried to imagine what people wanted to hear and tell them that. And of course, that wasn't a very good thing to do in the military. It culminated toward the end of my plebe year when my squad leader was going to recommend me for separation and said that I wasn't ready to be a naval officer. And I said, well, I pretty much said, well, there's nothing to be lost here. I'm going to go full bore assault on this guy. And so I said, well, look, sir, you haven't graduated. You're not ready to be a naval officer. I said, and I'm just a plebe. I'm certainly not ready to be a naval officer. So that's the ground you're going to recommend for me to be separated. You're going to have to come up with something better. And besides, I intend to take you and all your classmates on and do whatever it takes to stay here. That awakened within me that assertive thing I'd seen in my dad. And my entire world shifted at that point. It was a huge transformation. It wasn't that I had changed, my world changed. All of a sudden, all the upperclassmen who who were out to get me became my brothers. It's the damnedest thing I'd ever seen. They took me under their wing. They did everything they could to support me in succeeding for the rest of that plebe year, and I did that. And I don't know how to explain it, but it was an assertion. It was my first true assertion of self, and that I had that opportunity to experience that assertion throughout my entire naval career. Came up again and again and again and again, and it served me my entire life, knowing that that was within me, knowing that I could own whatever situation was presented to me. That was a huge thing for a kid who was 19 to realize, and it was a very powerful seed in terms of my life experience.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So you told truth to power.
Yes.
Yeah.
And frankly have ever since. And I sometimes I've gotten scarred from it, but you know what? It was worth it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what is it we teach in Science of Mind, but dominion, personal, stand in your truth, be fully who you are, make no apology for who you are. Yeah. Good training. Tom and Dennis, what do you think?
Well, I had something similar to Jim, because I had to learn in boot camp. They play, and I'm sure Sean and Jim will play something similar to this. They play a game with you about breaking you down and then building you back up.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to learn the game to be where they want you to be to graduate, like Jim was just saying. And the biggest game that I learned was that they want you to be able to not just follow orders, but to think about the order sometimes, because when you are, especially in the Navy, when you're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you're 3,000 miles from anybody else but the people on your ship. And if you have problems and you have confrontations, you're in trouble. And if you're under attack and you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there's no one to help you. So, so you have to learn to depend upon the people around you. And what I ended up learning, so I had to learn that in boot camp, and it kind of came in handy several times throughout my time in the fleet. But part of that was I ended up learning that sometimes you got to stand your ground, even to put you in the doghouse. Because I was, for one period of time, I was in the doghouse for 6 months with my chief petty officer because of I won't, long story, but something I did, and it took 6 months to prove that I was right. And he apologized after that 6 months, but I was in the doghouse for 6 months. But you know what? I wasn't gonna let that go just because, they were, superior ranked than I was. So, there's a lot of things I've learned. I watched people go from the mindset that I'm not going to take military orders, and literally be held back in their boot camp companies for 2, 3, 4 weeks, to suddenly going to being recruit company commanders in charge of the recruits and turning their training companies into the best companies in their training groups. And all it took was a shift in mindset, going from, I'm not going to listen to you, to, oh, this is how you do it. So.
Ego management. Good.
Yep.
Good. Dennis, what do you think?
I agree with everything's been said. I think military I got more out of the Navy than they ever got out of me. That's what I felt like, because I made that decision kind of like Jim, and it changed the way I was a little, I was 22, but it changed the way, probably the course of my life. One of the things is you were taught by God, somebody will be held accountable. The Navy still leads the services in relief. If you do something wrong, somebody's there to hold you accountable. So it grew me up real fast. You will be held accountable. I've had to stand before the captain and for the green table. Jim knows what I'm talking about, probably everyone. But it was this sense of you will be held accountable. So when I got out, even when I came back in, for example, I was a training staff. As I had captains, they were training as interns to be Army officers, psychologist officer. And I'd come up through the line side, which was not touchy-feely. And I still possess those linguistic skills and abilities to get someone's attention. Jim knows what I'm talking about. They all do. The military has their own language and the ability to get our attention. But I really, kind of like Jim, I heard everyone say when I was at Fort Campbell, I had a confrontation with the chief of behavioral health. I was representing fifth group. He was chief of the post. I put it in an email. I felt so strongly and fired him. A couple of people who are now generals probably remember it. Well, I didn't know. I thought surely, but I said I really felt almost like you said earlier. I would speak truth to power. I'm going to tell them. So here came the deputy group commander, and I thought, here it goes. I'm going to get my ass chewed really good. And I went in. He's like, no, we kind of expect that's what we want. And they were laughing. And even the group commander, who's now a general, 2-star, one thing they watched is if you'd stand up. So you have to learn to be assertive, say what you need to say, be appropriate. Sometimes the language gets a little colorful, but it really is about saying who you are. And even to this day, my wife will tell you, Jess, I still get up at a certain time. I believe in life, you can learn, one of the things you learn, you carry on, is a healthy regimentation, a wholesome discipline. There's a reason we do these things in the military. There's a reason. This other thing, I will still talk to the VA people. You need, and everybody here heard this, you need to learn attention to detail. And we all, Tom and everybody, and you learn that. And I've carried that, accountability, attention to detail, even to life now. And the what I call healthy, wholesome regimentation.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. Well, when you get out of the service and you come back to civilian life, does it bother you when you see people not being accountable? This kind of sloppy keeping of their word,
Yes.
passing the buck, that kind of thing.
It does for me, yeah.
I had recently, Jesse, I had some at the VA, and basically it was inappropriate. So I let them know straightforward. Here's what I did. I'm retired military. You're not going to do it. And I'll call you out. And I called them out right in front of everybody. I was a little heated, but they got the message. And sometimes you need to do that. So yes, and the accountability. I think one thing we all heard is we recognize one thing in each trade. You recognize good leadership and you recognize bad leadership. Mm-hmm. And problems can be solved. You have the right leaders.
That's right. In my own company, anybody associated with me, whether I work for them or whether they work for me, understand that I hold them accountable. And that's got me in trouble sometimes, especially with superiors, but I hold them accountable. If I can't give a leader the feedback that person needs to have me do the right thing for the company, then I can't function. And the entire leadership of my company knows that I'm pretty much going to tell it as it is. I'm going to do my best to be kind about it, but I won't spare anyone the facts. And my last, I raised issues with my last boss, and just the facts. And he was pushed to a new job as a result of it. So this domain that we have, that's our life, it is our life. It is no one else's life. And it's our responsibility. If we're not feeling good about our life, it's our responsibility to fix it for our own sake. And as it turns out, for the sake of everyone that's associated with us.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Reminds me of a quick story. Let me throw in here. I took a workshop years ago, and it was intensive 2-weekend self-help training kind of thing. You're probably familiar with the model. One of the rules they had is when they had a bathroom break or a meal break, you not be late. You have X number of minutes and you'd be back in the room. If you weren't back in the room, the doors were locked.
Mhm.
And there were people outside waiting to greet you. And of course, the people inside wondered what was going on with the people outside, how they were being chewed out and how they were being made wrong and all for breaking this one simple agreement. And the question that they asked you outside, because I was late back once, the question they asked you that is why I'm sharing this, it still rockets around my mind today. They said, you made an agreement to be back in the room on time, didn't you? Yes, I did. Did you keep the agreement? No, I didn't. They said, do you see this is why your life does not work?
Ooh.
And they were right across the board. So discipline, personal agency, telling truth to power, standing in your power, the promises that were made to you or alluded to when you joined the military about the things that you would learn and the brotherhood and sisterhood that you would forge with your comrades. How do you feel about aftercare since you got out? How satisfied are you with the follow-up that's been given to you and to the people that you know who may have mental health issues or may have physical needs? Are we doing right by our veterans?
I don't believe we are. I frankly, I don't know of any personally of any veteran. Well, actually, I do. My roommate from the Naval Academy was a submarine officer and was physically discharged because he had a heart attack after he'd made commander. And they pretty much cashiered him. He lost all of his benefits, and he did have VA care. And it was just when he lived in North Carolina. When I was in North Carolina, he was only 1.5 miles from my house. I was there when he got his 100% disability and had all of his, close to, well over $300,000 in back pay awarded to him. So I was very, very pleased to see that, and very sad at the way he had been denied by the VA all those years. You know, Dave's quite a guy. He was a nuclear submarine officer. In fact, he went through one of the Rickover interviews.
Oh,
And so, you know, he and I have been best friends since we were roommates when I was 19. So, and I've known him since I was 18. So, you know, he's a good guy. And that brotherhood runs deep between me and the guys in my company. So, yeah, from the guys that I've seen in my company, they're all pretty much well taken care of. Most of them retired. I know that for me, the medical benefits that I had, you know, I went in the reserve. The medical benefits that I have served me well. And of course, when DOMA came through, I was able to marry Gary, and now Gary has those same benefits as my spouse. And so I'm pretty pleased about that. By the same token, a very dear friend of mine worked with veterans with PTSD, and it breaks my heart that they have to go through what they go through, and that by and large, many feel forgotten. Lynn has told me a number of stories of the challenges that she faced as a caregiver. I think it's a mixed bag, and I think that we could do a hell of a lot better.
Thank you. Jesse, I look at history historically. They actually had Pinkerton guards. The veterans had formed on the mall, and there was a huge brouhaha going on where there were no benefits at all. I think they came out of World War II and there was zero. So historically speaking, we've gotten much better. The VA is humongous. The amount of demand on the VA, I have a lot of respect for the VA. I've used their services before in the past. I've had good experiences and bad experiences. Vasovagal syncope, losing consciousness at the VA, and they dropped the ball pretty good on that one. But I have a huge amount of respect when I go down to the DeBakey and see the demand on that place. It's incredible. The demand is absolutely incredible. So I have a healthy respect for it, for the people there that are actually trying. I've met some very, very good people in medical field that are trying very hard to provide for veterans, and they're doing a very honorable job. That part I respect. I myself, as a disabled veteran, I collect VA benefits. I am extremely blessed, beyond belief, blessed every day. I say thanks for that benefit, and that benefit helps my daughter as well. And so I cannot say anything bad for me personally. Aftercare, I had a friend that committed suicide. They lost him, which means you're getting out, and they stop you the process of getting out, forcefully stop you from getting out, called stop loss. And they forced him to clean out containers, chemical containers in Iraq. And he finally, it was a very, very bad deal for him emotionally, and he finally committed suicide. So, you know, for people like, do we try? I think we do try. Do we get everybody? No, obviously not.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, for the last part of this, I've got 7:36. We go to about 7:45 and then start taking questions, if there are any, which I don't know. I'll hear if there are from our producers at the control center. About patriotism, about war and peace. I was going to read you something from Ernest Holmes. This is from an essay he wrote called Spiritual Armament. He delivered it then on the radio on August the 6th, 1950, and it won an award from the Freedom Foundation. Just an excerpt from this. The greatest responsibility that ever came to a nation, and with it the greatest opportunity, has come to our great country, which, with other democracies, is making a united effort to preserve those values which are dear to all freedom-loving people throughout the world. And as we arm for this conflict, we may have the inward assurance that right is on our side, and we should clear our minds of all confusion about this, for there is not, and never has been, any political or economic system that can equal democracy. So he speaks about arming for this conflict, and it's shocking sometimes to religious scientists to read that, because it's not, I had to kind of ferret it out to get it in the book, but it's, we're not pacifists. We're not a pacifist organization, but we are a peace-loving organization, and we yearn for peace. So my question to you in two parts is basically this. When does constructive dialogue between opposing nations become appeasement? When is a line crossed where war becomes inevitable in your mind? And the second part of that is, do you feel there'll always be war?
You know, Jesse, I've thought about that when I was in the third grade. I remember there was this saying attributed to Plato, only the dead have seen the end of war. And I believe that we will always have it. I look at history. We'll realize the civilization part is what, 8,000 to 10,000 years, 12, 15. And it took Europe, until the last century to realize maybe this war thing isn't so great. General Mattis had a really good comment when he was Secretary of Defense, when he heard the administration under number 45 said they weren't filling the diplomatic post. And he said, you need to buy me more ammunition. He meant it. He understood the benefit of diplomacy. I think the United States has been a force for great good in the world. And sometimes it's going to require sacrifice. So it's something, that's a tough question. I don't
I
know.
know.
When you keep talking and you try to avoid, but at some point, I think it depends. It's a very difficult question. I read the geopolitics as to when do we actually have to fight? If one final thought, if you read Tolkien served at the Somme,
Yeah.
where the British suffered, started July 1st, 1917, I believe. 60% casualties, entire villages were blown away. And his friends died that he had gone to, I think, Oxford with. And one thing he said, if you remember, the king returns. They're standing before Mordor, and it shaped his views. He said, "The day may come where men's hearts fail them, and they choose not to fight." He said, "Today we fight." So I think that we always need to have that willingness if we absolutely have to, but only after diplomacy and talk has failed.
For me in serving, it was to serve as part of a defensive force, primarily in my mind. It was us having the mass size where we're so threatening that nobody is going to try anything with us. That was my general interpretation. And I see the geopolitics with China, mainly China and Russia. Hate to name names, but these are factors that we are into deep right now. Playing the game of chicken with China down there in the South China Sea. It's right. At what point does the waving the finger or waving the or having the size and the technological advances that we do have to prevent things like this from happening? Correct. And hopefully learning from history.
At this point,
Hopefully.
at this point, I see our technological development, our military improvements, the advanced fighter jets and what's coming to be the 6th generation fighter as mostly diplomatic positioning. I mean, it has to be real for it to be effective. I don't know that I think it would be dangerous for us to say, here's where the line is, except within a specific context. And my prayer is that the people who are making that decision are divinely inspired.
Yeah.
But as a kid, Dad was stationed as the sergeant of the guard at the embassy in Tehran, Iran. And I lived there as a kid in an elementary school. And, the Shah's driver would come to our house and pull our 16 millimeter movie of the 10 Commandments or whatever was playing at the time, because the Shah wanted to see it. And there are pictures of my dad and the Shah and Eisenhower and Kennedy. And there's a certain grandiosity about it that that I fear could turn into hubris pretty easily. And I don't know. I pray for the balance, and I pray for the realistic readiness. And I think part of my fear around that is that we seem to be governed by what Eisenhower warned is the military-industrial complex, where we're buying military goods so that companies can profit. There's some advantage to it, but there's some major disadvantages to it. I would rather see us be a real democracy and balance our expenditures and our capabilities with what smart people perceive to be the threats, and where diplomats say, I need this, or I need you to adopt this posture, and can you as the military do that? It's all a balance. But I do believe personally that that humankind will see the end of war, and I don't believe it'll be because of the extinction of the human race. I we are evolving, and we're evolving faster and faster. And the events that we see today, I believe, are bringing things to the forefront that have festered for hundreds of years. Racism and fascism and so on. And there is a democracy of consciousness that is rising, and it will reach a point, a critical point, a tipping point where it will tip, and wars will be something of the past. I honestly believe that. I've seen that in my mind's eye, and I'm convinced of it.
God bless. Thank you. Tom, you want in?
Yeah, just real quick. I believe I agree with a lot of what Jim said. I don't see the end of war coming anytime not in this century. I think there's too many, like you said, too many pre-existing issues to be worked out for the human race before that comes. So, as to whether or not, the first question, it's a case-by-case basis, because wars have started for a lot of reasons. I mean, you look at the wars of the 20th century, where you cross that line between appeasement and war has always been, a very fine line as to what, as to where you go. I mean, but the other side is, we talked about continuing war. I have to check my history on this, but if I remember correctly, somebody once said that in the 20th century, there was only a period of something like 5 years where there wasn't some kind of armed conflict going on in the world. So, I said I have to go back and check that. So, I mean, you're talking about, 100 years and only 5 of them were actually not some kind of armed conflict, so we'll have to see what happens on that.
Yeah, who was it said? Was it Einstein, I think? I could be wrong. I haven't Googled it. When asked what weapons World War III would be fought with, he said, I don't know, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah.
I think it might have been him.
Yeah, and so since the Second World War, the concern has been that war can become uncontainable. It's not simply one army positioned against another army on some hillside somewhere, right, but whole cities, whole continents get taken out by a push of a button someplace. So we pray for peace, but peace with understanding. And part of me, I have to look at this somewhat skeptically and ironically. When I look at this piece by Ernest Holmes, I agree with every word he says in here. And then I look at the date, and it's 1950, and it's the start of the Korean conflict. And that's the worst war this country's ever been in, because it accomplished nothing. The whole thing was jacked up from beginning to end. And my dad was there, and social scientists and so on. Since then, it was an overreaction. It was this and this. And it's like, is there a good war? Some say the last good war was the Second War, and where we were clearly fighting fascism and genocide, on a mass scale. Well, I'm going to shout out to Lisa and Danielle now, while we and see what they may have for us on there. I'm tempted to say. Well, I'm not tempted. I am going to say, like our president would say, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you all. A question we didn't get to tonight, we can discuss it another time. We can create another time for it, because this came up actually in our Be the Change meeting. is how veterans feel about being told thank you for your service. And is that
Thank you.
disingenuous, or is it, how do you know, how does that, Lisa, do we have time for that question, or
Yes, you have time for it because we don't have any questions.
we don't have any questions? All right, cool.
But
Well,
we
go
did
ahead.
have a comment from Michelle Macias, who was a Marine.
Uh-huh.
And she did comment that moving back into civilian life was very difficult. And I'm a military brat. My father was in boot camp when I was born. Honestly, I would like you to do another one of these, but this time I would like you to do it with a panel of female veterans.
Yeah.
Because the stories that I have heard are very different from what the men have experienced.
Yeah.
That was the concern we had when we set this up, was that it was all white men speaking. And we thought, well, you know, let's do this, and then we'll do something else. I'd love to have women. Yeah, Michelle, a Marine, and she's also a world-class, what is it, triathlete now, or was last time I heard. They've moved away from our area. But yes, and we'll get people of color on here, and, you know, we'll keep talking about this as much as you want, because it's, you know, it's a huge issue. But then everything we talk about is a huge issue. You know, one we've got coming up is going to be on economic inequality, and how you can fund infrastructures and reform the banking system and so on, so that everybody gets a fair shot. You know, you're not having a person of color isn't having their house valued at $75,000 less than when they have a white person front it for them, you know, that kind of thing. So, okay, so on the matter of when people thank you for your service,
I pretty much take it at face value. The people who say that to me don't know me and I don't know them. And so I go, well, you're welcome, my honor, and move on. It's not unpleasant. I have, I have heard of veterans who have sacrificed far more than I in terms of life and limb, and or dear friends, and I can see how they would see that it was pretty shallow. But that's not how I find it.
I was coming back out of Germany. I think I was going through JFK, and I was in my Class A's. I was in my dress uniform, and just traveling. I just had a dress uniform on to travel. I think a lot of people don't do that anymore today. And a woman had come right up to me face to face, and just like very pointedly said, "Thank you very much for your service." And I just very politely said, "Well, thank you very much for saying something." And we just both parted and went on. And it was just very sincere. Maybe she had heard it in church, maybe, you know, whatever the forum was, but she made a very pointed effort to stop right up front, face to face, and said, "Thank you very much for your service." And just having a quick, good, appropriate response ready and saying, "You're very well." And I think maybe even a picture of a Rambo is hanging on the Sylvester Stallone. Yeah, that was big at that time.
It's certainly more pleasant than in my day in the 60s and the early 70s.
Right. And you got hammered. Right. Guys didn't get what you deserved. The Vietnam generation did not. Yeah. No ticker tape parade. Right. Nope.
Oh, you know, and in many countries, two things on that I want to share. One is that in the early days of Creative Life, we had a lot of Vietnam vets. Many of the men who formed the center 35 years ago were Vietnam vets, and they had been spat on and shunned and this and carried all kinds of grievous psychological baggage and nothing to do with it. We lost some of them to substance abuse. The other thing was, you know, and you can go on YouTube and you can see, like in the UK for one, every, I guess, division, regiment that came back from Afghanistan or Iraq got a parade with the pipes and the drums, and following them, marching in precise order, were all the veterans, all the way up to incredibly ancient individuals. Second World War had to be, you know, marching through Aberdeen, marching through Edinburgh and Glasgow and so on, and all the people turning out with the little flags, applauding as they went by. You know, there's something, not only is it stirring and make the hair on the back of your neck stand up to watch that, especially the skirling of the pipes, you know, but there's something about that that is just so sweet. It's like, welcome home, thank you. We can't imagine what you went through, but you're back now. And you're not just by yourself with a duffel bag getting off a plane in some airport and catching an Uber. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
you really deliberately re-entered into society. So one last thing I have for you is consider, as I know you do, that when somebody thanks you for your service, they're also thanking their dad and their granddad, and they're thanking, you know, the neighbor that didn't come back. And it's sometimes people need to say that out of the burden of what they're carrying, that they weren't able to say to the first person they meant it towards. So, Lisa, you got stuff for us?
Yes, I do. You've kind of touched on it. And I touched on it from the female perspective because I do know a lot of female veterans, but Sandy was asking if you guys have any, you veterans have any insight onto how African Americans have been treated. And she did specifically reference about returning from active duty. So
I can talk about my plebe company at the Naval Academy. There were 32 of us, and we had one black fellow, Rod Shockley. And he not by my classmates, but by the first class, he was treated atrociously with the N-word and the humiliation and everything else. And we lost him we lost him the year before last. His daughter called us. But my black classmates really never did show up for their company reunions year to year, nor did Rod attend ours, though we wanted him to. They had their own reunion, and it's a crime. My sophomore year as a youngster, we had two speakers. We had something called the Forestall Lecture Series, and we had the name escapes me. She's the first black congresswoman came to address us, and it was moving, and certainly awakened me to my privilege. When I was 19 or 20, 19, I think. We went back to Bancroft Hall and gathered in the rooms of our black classmates and asked them to tell us their story. And it was very difficult to hear. And I was glad when I was commissioned that in the Navy at the time, they were really heavy on anti-racism. And so anybody could turn in anybody who made a racist slur. And that person then had to go through racial sensitivity training. And if they did it again, they were out of the Navy. And that was something I was very grateful to see happen. But there's still discrimination that's going on, and it's a crime.
Yeah. And sexual abuse also.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Still a problem.
Jim, was your speaker the Honorable Shirley Chisholm?
Yes, it was. And she was there with Gloria Steinem, actually. She spoke first and Gloria Steinem spoke second, and that would have been in 1972.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry. That would have been in 1970.
She was, how I know that, she's from my old stomping ground, I think the New York 17th.
Yeah. She was amazing, absolutely amazing. The brigade jumped to their feet in a standing ovation when she finished speaking.
Jesse, they had a special, and our Secretary of Defense, General Austin, was speaking. And when he was a four-star, pretty high ranking, when he would come, he had his staff. And it kind of goes to what Jim is saying is people did not expect the general to be African-American. So there's still tremendous amount of change. And he talked about it. Well, who's a general? Denise and I have a friend. In fact, he's a gentleman. He stood up the Army Intelligence Command. He was a major general, African-American, Prairie View A&M grad. And he's in his 80s. But he went to Park in the last 3 years at Fort Huachuca at the commissary. And a man was talking to General Parker, sir, you can't park there. He said, that's for a general. And he kept having to tell his young man, I know. The young man couldn't believe this guy was African-American, 2-star general. And to kind of follow up with what Sean was talking about, every week, I deal with female veterans. I do not include, and I've got friends. I do not know of a single female veteran. This is who is not sexually harassed, and some were assaulted. The VA has a military sexual trauma. I had a young lady last week. She said, I was doing okay until COVID. And just listening to the pain. We have a program specifically set aside, but it's still rampant. I had to deal with it on active duty, and I'm still dealing with it as a veteran, as a psychologist. So the problems of racism, sexism, sexual abuse, sexual assault, the problems at Fort Hood that came out, I was talking to someone about, they're still very real. And you have to change the state and make it clear that this won't be tolerated. People have dignity, worth, and value and should be treated as such.
My roommate for the last 2 years, Tom Gallagher, went on to command 15,000 sailors in the Balkan Wars as a Commodore. And his wife Kathy was one of the first female line officers to find her way through the ranks, and she has some stories to tell. And some of the things that she had to put up with completely amaze me. And she is a stalwart when it comes to women breaking the glass ceiling, and because she certainly did a measure of that herself. She's an amazing person to know. It's my privilege to know them both.
Awesome.
Maybe she'd love to come talk to us. Let's set it up.
Well, yeah, she certainly do that from Zoom, I can tell you.
Yeah. See, it suddenly dawned on us, that we don't have to get people on the stage like Sean is now, and just work with local folks, as wonderful as local folks are. But we can bring people in from all over the world and have these conversations if they're willing, like we did last month with Thomas and Daniel for Pride Month out of Santa Fe, and that was sweet. And if you haven't seen that, it's still up. And all of these in the weekly emails, all of these. The links to all of these soul sessions are present and can be found, or you can just scroll down our Facebook page and find them in there. I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to do this tonight, to have this conversation. We've opened all sorts of interesting topics, and I look forward to many more conversations with you, both privately and online like this. Lisa, have you anything else for us?
No, other than I did Google, and the quote that you used from Einstein, it's a direct quote, it's a paraphrase.
It's a paraphrase.
Okay. That was Einstein.
Cool. See, these guys fact check. You see on Sunday when I'm speaking, they're all down here and they're like, they put it in the link, So, okay. So I guess we're complete here now tonight. Is there any other business to come before this august body?
Just to thank you for hosting
Yes, thank
the
you.
program. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for everybody who participated in this. I'm very grateful that I
Yeah.
was able to.
I'm grateful you were too, Jim. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Jim came up to, we had the three of you, and Jim came up to me and said, I want in. And of course he should be in. My only concern was, how many people, because all of you talk, this is it. I mean, we're not having to pull stuff out of you. We have all of you. I've had these great conversations with, and you're so verbal and articulate. Thank you again. So, hey, Tom, you want to pray us out?
Okay.
Tom's on a spot.
I know.
Put you on a spot.
Yeah.
Let Lisa whisper something in your ear.
Yeah, I know. One power, one presence, one spirit, which we all connected. And let us know and pray for our brothers and sisters in the military. May their experience be all that they want it to be, all they wish it to be. And may they gain strength, comfort, and a direction from their service. And so it is.
And so it is.
So it is.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a great
Thank
rest
you.
of the week.
See you Sunday.
Bye-bye.
Bye.